I'm not stealing this shine, Joe Tanzi. This is your time. Take it away,
Well,
sir.
yeah, you're Mr. Introductions. I figured you'd give us a little bit of hype after UNC gets the number 1 seed, Sean Brace.
Well, first and foremost, yes, it's the most wonderful time of the year. The brackets are out, and we are here, folks. Of course, we got the big brains and all things college hoops representing the squad on the Gambler. Joe Tanzi in the middle of your screen. Ryan Beef Coyle at the end. We'll be joined by Mark Henry Jr. in a little bit, and I am Sean Brace. We're excited about another chapter in the Gambler's book for all things college hoops. I feel like we do it better than anybody in this city. And I will absolutely say that we even took a step forward up even this year. So I'm extremely excited about what we have going on for all of us here at College Hoops on the Gambler. And on top of that, we're getting rewarded. How about it, folks? We got a sponsor. AAA is going to be rolling with us from here on out. All of our college basketball coverage will be presented by AAA. Be ready, get AAA. It's that simple. We'll be hitting on a lot over the next couple weeks until we crown a champion in Phoenix, right? And man, this is our Glendale, Phoenix, same thing, right?
It's the same thing. It's the Phoenix metro area.
There you go. But without further ado, let's get to it, boys. Look, bracket just came out. They, of course, had a great panel. You know, I thought that they crushed it, keeping it moving. I saw people getting upset about the Big East. I'll tell you straight up, I spent a lot of time watching the Mountain West because there's sickos like you guys. You guys told me how important the Mountain West was, so I had to feel like I got to stay up and watch these buzzer beaters at 11:30 in the morning. It's probably a good thing they didn't get they didn't get, you know, they made the tournament, but seating was a little bit lower than some folks would have liked as far as on the timeline is concerned. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and give me a take on the Mountain West or the Big East or the snubs to start, but of course, like I said, man, it's exciting. Everyone's fired up.
I'll be honest, I'm happy with the bracket. I don't have any major takes. Look, we've seen the last 48 hours bid stealer upon bid stealer upon bid stealer, right? So teams are going to be squeezed out regardless. You know, you look at UAB, you look at Duquesne. How about Duquesne? What a story. Like, these are things as a college basketball fan where you're like, wow, this is really awesome to see some different teams that haven't made the tournament in 30 plus years. I mean, the Long Beach State story is crazy. They fired their coach on Monday and they're in the NCAA tournament on Sunday. It's really incredible, but it does come at a price. And look, basically all I have to say to this is, well, if you were on the bubble in the first place, you probably had some really big hiccups and you put yourself in that position to start. So the Seton Halls, the St. John's, the Providence of the world, yes. Would I love to see one of them in the tournament? Sure. But it's not going to be like the end of the world for myself. Like, the only one I really have a problem with, I don't even know if it's a problem, is Indiana State versus Virginia. And that's mainly because of eye test for me personally. Like, Virginia just plays a really slow pace of basketball, and they're not really good at it this year. And you watch them in the ACC tournament, they weren't great. So I see Indiana State as one of the best mid-majors this season. I would have liked to see them in over Virginia. But other than that, I don't really have any really major concerns with the bracket. The 10 seeds in Dayton had to happen because the bottom fourth of the bracket, at least the seed ranking, is so low in quality because we had all of these upsets. But other than that, I'm okay with it. I don't really have to plant my flag at any take about the bracket.
Beef, over to you, but the Virginia, the Pat Forty's tweet, Virginia 4-5 in its last 9 games, hasn't beaten an NCAA tournament since February 3rd. Did it have something to do with the fact that they won a national championship in recent years? You know, of course, it's a great program. We know what they're capable of, but it just hasn't been there this year for Virginia. Where do you stand on Virginia making the bracket?
Yeah, that was the team I was definitely most upset that got in. I think I saw 9 of Virginia's 10 losses were by double digits. So even in the games that they lost, they weren't even keeping it close. They've been outclassed pretty much against the top-notch competition throughout the year. When you go back to Indiana State, when you look at them, they were ranked 29th in the net coming into this bracket. The lowest team or highest-ranked team to ever miss the tournament in the net was 33 with NC State a couple years back. So Indiana State there at 29. They didn't do themselves any favors losing those 2 conference games in quad 4. But I am upset about the Big East. Joe, I know throughout the season you were kind of saying how you didn't really want to see some of these mid-tier Big East teams in, but this was the second best conference according to Ken Pom in college basketball. Even if just one of the trio of St. John's, Seton Hall, or Providence got in, I think they would have given us a better game too than what we're getting out of probably Virginia. I love Colorado State in that first 4 game, but this is a little upset that the Big East kind of got snubbed because I think St. John's, Seton Hall, or Providence, any of those teams could have won 1 or 2 games in the tournament had they gotten in.
I agree in this current stage, but St. John's really didn't turn it on until Pitino put the white suit on. But so their overall body of work wasn't overly impressive.
Yeah,
Seton Hall, if they would have beaten St. John's, I think they're in, so that they had the opportunity there. And Providence, it was always going to be tough because they lost their best player to torn ACL, and as well as they did perform, that was a hit. I love the Big East as much as anybody, but am I going to sit here and plant my flag on either of those 3 teams that could potentially make a deep run in March? No. And I think that's why I'm kind of okay with only 3 Big East teams. I think the middle of the Big East was just pretty average. And I don't know, the Mountain West, I think that will tell, but everybody is going to point to 2 years ago when everybody lost except for San Diego State. And if that happens again, then I think we need to do a serious reassessment of what we think the Mountain West should be in the national landscape.
I wanted to see St. John's. Rick Pitino is real. It's an unbelievable story.
It would have been great if we got Rick versus Richard in the first 4. That would have been phenomenal.
I want to definitely get your thoughts on some of the storylines as far as your top 3. There's the selection committee. I thought normally, and just a real quick brief hit on this one because I got other things I want to get to. I just thought that there was only a couple storylines, in my opinion. I thought that it was lacking. I don't know if you guys have a take on that, but we'll get into those a little bit later. First of all, conference with multiple bids. 8 Big 12, 8 SEC, 6 Big 10, 6 Mountain West, 5 ACC, 4 Pac-12. 3 Big East, 2 American, 2 A10, 2 West Coast. That's how it broke out. And as we've been correctly saying, there was 5 teams were able to get in that did not have automatic bids and were able to win their way in, or an at-large bid because of the automatic bid. So that's ultimately what a lot of this played out. And I think the guy that hopped on CBS afterwards said, the combined the last 2 years there was 3, so 3 teams that they've had to deal with. By far the most difficult year for a selection committee. And Joe, you say they did a good job. You give them a thumbs up. Beef, are you giving them a thumbs down
for the bid stealers?
No, just the bracket in general. Selection committee.
I think, for the most part, my biggest discrepancy, like I was saying, was just Virginia getting in. Okay. If you're going to go with kind of I know it's the overall body of work, but what have you done for me lately? Virginia kind of squeaking they needed overtime to beat Boston College, and then they lose last night to NC State. I'd much rather have seen St. John's the way that they've been playing. The way that I know for the most part it was a real back and forth game, and UConn pulled away a little bit at the end, but that is a very good basketball team, I think, and the way that they've been playing recently, that St. John's team. And as we know with Rick Pitino, they're the team that people would be like, oh, you don't want to see them in your bracket, but they're really a team that you didn't want to see in your bracket. And I think would strike a lot more fear into people's eyes than Virginia. And we're just going to get another boring Virginia basketball game.
Joe, over to you. What teams in your mind, we just briefly hit on the screwed part, teams that came up just short. What about teams that got lucky, and whether that's a matter of going on a run here and winning their conference tournament? Is there a team or two that's extremely lucky to be in the position that they are right now?
Here's my hot take. I think Florida Atlantic is extremely lucky to be in the field.
I said that too before the show to my one friend. I said I think that they were going to be out. For them to get
not only
2. Yeah.
What are they, 8?
Yeah. They're an 8 seed in UConn's bracket. I mean, look at who they lost to us, the Bryant, the Florida Gulf Coast, to Charlotte,
Temple.
The FGCU loss, the Bryant loss, the Temple loss. I think if you took this team, FAU, and took the name off of it, and this wasn't a team that made an incredible run to the Final Four last year, I don't know if they get in. Because how many years have we done this with, teams, I guess, A10, AAC, West Coast level, where too bad. You know what I mean? you're the best team in your conference, but too bad you have enough bad losses. I really thought it was going to be closer for FAU. And yeah, I can't get into the committee's minds, but I think they got a little bit of help because of who they are.
And I think you could say the same thing, too, about San Diego State getting a 5 with 10 losses. When you look at the rest of the way the Mountain West was seeded, I think Utah State as an 8, and then you had 2 teams in the play-in, New Mexico at 11. I think I might have missed it, but did they say if New Mexico hadn't won the automatic bid, were they getting in? Because them sitting there as 11, I think that would have been a really
I don't think they were. I think that's what he did say, if I'm not mistaken, because he corrected him, and that's when he said that there was 5 teams and they were one of them. Mark Henry Jr. joined the program. Mark, am I correct on that statement there, sir?
He called him a bid stealer, so that makes you think that they wouldn't have been in. Yeah,
I think the way the Mountain West was viewed as a whole, I think it's safe to assume New Mexico was on the outside.
Yeah, I mean they watched the Mountain West all year and they were like, well, these teams are average, but they aren't what the college basketball community thought they were. I guess. I mean, man, I was shocked to see some of those teams with the Mountain West.
All right, Mark Henry Jr., catch us up here. 60 seconds. Your first initial takeaway. A team's got screwed. You're upset. Where do you stand on the whole bracket right now?
My first takeaway is the Caleb Love potential revenge game in the Elite Eight with North Carolina and Arizona. I mean, that is next level college basketball stuff. I think that bracket breaks out perfectly for those teams to make that run. And get to that Elite Eight. As you guys know, I'm nowhere near as high on Baylor as a lot of people are. Even the 4 and the 5, like Alabama as a 4 seed there. I think there's some serious defensive problems that UNC will pick apart if they were to match up. So that was my first takeaway. I think that's a really, really fun potential matchup down the line. And then I think the bottom right, you guys know I am not buying in on Purdue and Tennessee. I think that bottom right bracket could be absolutely mayhem. I think there's potential for upsets and, second, third round upsets all throughout that board. Gonzaga, I know that I think some people feel they're a bit overseeded at 5. They finished like top 15 in KenPom. I think they absolutely have a chance to go on a run. Texas, they're overseeded at 7, but we saw what they did last year in the tourney. They have Max Asmus. I think there's a lot to like about Texas. That's a scary round 2 matchup for Tennessee.
That's Rick Barnes versus Texas too, by the way.
Great matchup there. Great storyline. And by the way, I'll just say it. Texas wins there. Texas to the Sweet 16.
Wow. So let's talk about Tennessee, because there's a very distinct stat that no team has ever won the national championship without winning at least one of their conference tournament games. And this year, there's a staggering amount of teams in that group. Tennessee, Kentucky, Creighton, Duke, Kansas, Alabama. It was jarring how many of those teams lost their first conference tournament game. Should we be alarmed on those guys? I mean, look, Tennessee, we've already had concerns because it's Rick Barnes in March, and it reared its ugly head against Mississippi State. So how do we judge all of those teams because of that stat? Because it's not just one you throw at the wall like a 12 versus 5 and hope it hits. This has never happened.
Yeah, let me go ahead. I want to bring this to the group here off of that, Joe. Let's just dive right into this South region. Mm-hmm. And I want to focus on Kentucky for a second, because off of what you just said right there, with all the anarchy, is this the year that this changes? I know I saw Jared Smith, who I love. He's like, that's it. Duke's out. All right. But and I get it, right? History is what history is, but doesn't it come down to matchups? Doesn't it come down to path? I was never in on Kentucky all season long. When people were telling me Kentucky, watch out for Kentucky. And then you get the bracket and I look and I'm having a hard time not having Kentucky going up against Marquette. If Tyler Kolek returns, well, he should, of course, but still no lock if he's going to be playing right from the jump for them, then I will have Marquette over Kentucky. But I think Kentucky can make a nice run here and maybe back up some of the people that have been preaching Kentucky possibly making a run in March. Where do you stand on that one, Joe?
Well, they can make a run. It's just the status, no championships.
It's true.
So, look, it's a very long path.
UConn ain't losing, boys. I hate to break it to everybody. I got the future. We're all in on UConn. Everybody on CBS, Jay Wright, we all picked UConn. They ain't losing. Sorry.
So that's always how that goes.
The one thing I think ever work. No, never. The one thing I think in the South region is kind of interesting too is talking about history. I mean, how many of us, and look, I'm guilty of this with Iowa a few years ago, when we see a team make an unexpected run through its conference tournament, and then we all of a sudden think everything is okay. There's two distinct cases of this. Is Iowa, I think they were both 2 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But Iowa, when they won the Big Ten and everybody was questioning them, like Fran McCaffrey, who also has a really bad track record in March, and then Georgetown, when they won the Big East, they got obliterated by Colorado as a 12 seed, and everybody was on them. And it just so happened they got hot 1 week in New York, and that's it. And then, like, let's look at this as a whole. NC State is the perfect example of that. There's a reason why they were the number 10 seed in the ACC tournament. Like, an incredible run. DJ Burns is awesome, but they also are who they are. You know, I think that's going to be one of the things you have to focus on when you're looking at these brackets. It's, yes, incredible run. Same with Wisconsin. But what did Wisconsin do in the last 6 weeks of the regular season that made you convinced they were even an NCAA tournament team? Nothing really. So I think this South bracket kind of has a feel to it could go chalk at the end. It could be chaos at the start. Like it's hard to pick out anybody other than Houston. So Wisconsin struggled, NC State struggled, Kentucky's been up and down, and Marquette's got the Tyler Kolek injury. It really feels like Houston, which, by the way, the most experienced, most trustworthy of the number 1 seeds to get far in the tournament. They've been in the second weekend for 4 years in a row. Like, it just feels like out of all the regions, that feels like the most chalky at the end of it.
Beef, your take on the South.
I do like what you were saying, Brace, with Kentucky's path. I think they have 2 very favorable draws in their first 2 matchups, either knocking off Oakland and then either Texas Tech or NC State. I like them in either one of those matchups. So I think they have a real nice path there, the talent-wise. And the quick turnaround after losing that game to Texas A&M, are they going to be able to bounce back? That's the thing I said about Duke last week. I think it was when they were playing NC State. I was like, I'm interested to see how they bounce back to some adversity, and they didn't against NC State. Kentucky, same thing. 1 and done in the SEC tournament. Cal's definitely feeling it. If he doesn't get past the second weekend, they're going to be coming for his head in Lexington for sure. But I do like their path at least there to the Sweet 16. I think there could be some chaos though with I like Colorado to beat Boise State. The Colorado-Florida winner, even with a healthy Tyler Kolek, I think one of those 2 teams could knock off Marquette as well. So I think we could have like a 7 or a 10 potentially go into the Sweet 16 as well down there in the bottom.
Mark Henry Jr. On the go ahead, Joe.
Colorado's the team to watch, by the way.
Yeah, in the first 4. That should be that's what again.
Because that's your other trend. First 4 team going to the Sweet 16. How many years does that happen? Pretty much every year.
Jeez. All right.
I think it's ever since it happened, it's been they've won at least 1 game in the field as well.
Like UCLA made it, VCU made it deep, but yeah, the first 4, one of the 2 first 4 at-large teams usually gets to the second weekend.
Mark,
sorry, Mark, didn't want to cut you off there.
No, you're good. Mark Henry Jr. As far as the South is concerned, is Houston? Are the number 1 seeds properly ranked in your mind? Would you say Houston is the worst overall or number 1 seed out of the 4? And your total assessment on the South region?
I think, I'm biased on Purdue, so I can't really give like an honest answer there. But I think Houston and UNC are second and third. You could convince me either way. I think they're about even in different ways. But the Marquette disrespect from my man Beef over there. Marquette's winning this region. Marquette is going to the Final Four. Marquette's going to the national championship.
I wouldn't complain about that. I have 2 futures.
I know. So, yeah, we both have the Marquette futures. Yeah. I just think I love how they look. I know that they lost by 16 to UConn. I loved how they looked without Kolek in those games leading up to that. I think that only helps. Cam Jones, Iguodaro stepping up into bigger roles. I think that's only going to help when Kolek's back, which Shaka announced everything but that in his post he did a little press conference and said, he was already doing conditioning when he got there this morning and all this stuff. He's ready to go. He has to pass a couple tests, they said, but should be good to go for Western Kentucky. I think they were smart be a little bit cautious with the Big East tournament and hold them out, and they still played well. So I'm believing in Marquette. I think Shaka's got this team drinking the juice. I think Marquette is primed to make a deep run, and I don't think they'll be seeing Kentucky. I think they'll be seeing Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech takes Kentucky down. I love Texas Tech -5.5 against NC State. That's one of my favorite first round plays early on here. I think Texas Tech's a team that's getting slept on big time. And we've seen them step up against some high octane offenses like Baylor and shut them down. I think we see some more of the same against Kentucky.
It brings me great displeasure, and it kills my entire being in existence as a college basketball fan to mention it this way. We haven't mentioned the Duke Blue Devils, and it pains me. It absolutely pains me to even stick up for that program. But they got a path to the Sweet 16 that's, I think, pretty easy. Vermont really hasn't done much, if anything, in the tournament in plenty of years. I think who's the Taylor Coppenrath? Is that who their mid-major hero was like a decade and a half ago? Vermont gets in, but they typically don't do much in the NCAA tournament. And look, that 5-12 game, Wisconsin JMU is going to be the most popular 12 pick, very hands down. And look, when you look at the way Wisconsin played, just mentioned it, outside of the Big Ten tournament, I mean, you look at their last 6 weeks, and it's not great. So JMU will be the sexy pick there. But I don't know. I think 2 weeks ago, before the loss to UNC, everybody was hopping on the Duke bandwagon. And now all of a sudden we're completely off. I think that might end up benefiting them. And I think a Houston-Duke Sweet 16 game looks really enticing. I'm looking for all these props coming out. They're just getting region odds right now. Houston +150, but guess who's second to come out of the South? Duke at +295. Says it's got to say at least something about what John Shire's built.
JMU's bringing the right hype for a reason. They have the longest winning streak heading into this spot, 13 straight, 31 wins this year. I could see the hype. I could see the reason why behind the hype with JMU. Wisconsin, again, I think what you said, Joe, it's like, where was this Wisconsin team for the majority of the season? They look pretty good today. Came up just short against Illinois. Vermont, that's on you guys. That's why you guys got the big brains here. So I think Duke wins that. But, yeah, JMU is probably going to be the team that meets him there. We'll see what happens. Mark, what was your take, bud?
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I think if you made me say what Sweet 16 matchup are you most confident will happen, I think it's Houston-Duke. Yeah. I think if you made me pick one matchup and say that's going to happen no matter what, lock it in, buy the tickets, I think it's Houston-Duke. And the thing I'll say is, Joe, you know how high I am on this Duke team. Houston feels like just a nightmare of a match.
Oh, absolutely.
Just a nightmare.
I feel like it's at least worth mentioning Duke because we've they're second to win the region. I'm not saying with any conviction they're going to do it, but I think they at least. I hate doing this, being the respect Duke guy, because I think Kyle Filipowski is just a complete idiot for what all the crap he did. But I think if you're going to make a bet though in that region, Kentucky +550 or Marquette +850 to win the region is where you go with that. I want to see what Sweet 16 odds we get, Elite 8 odds we get, because I think that the parts of that bracket can be really interesting to figure out. I mean, look at if Colorado beats Florida, can you get a little bit on that? And maybe is Tyler Kolek 100%? Look, Colorado's got these NBA draft prospects that like 5 people in the nation have watched because A, they've been injured, and B, they've been on the Pac-12 network. But what happens when Eddie Lampkin, who, by the way, they almost beat Arizona last year, TCU? Mm-hmm. Like, he's an experienced big man who can cause some harm to any of these teams that may take them lightly. So I think there's some fascinating teams in there. I do think Houston gets through the Final Four, but I think Houston Duke at the top. But man, Nebraska A&M is going to be a fantastic game. Tominaga against Wade Taylor, that's one of the best individual guard matchups you will see in the first round. I hope that there's like 170 points in that game, and Buzz Williams goes through about 5 shirts that he sweats through. That's going to be a fantastic game. There's going to be no juice left for either team against Houston, but I think there's some fascinating subplots before we just move Houston on to Phoenix.
All right, Beef, let's go ahead and talk about the Midwest. You're Mr. Purdue. You said it's their year. I'm wondering if you're still sticking with that as far as them getting to the Final Four. And then also from the general look of it, man, I'm getting old. I need my readers. And again, I didn't fill a bracket out. I won't do that until, 2 days, and who cares filling out a bracket anyways. We all do it, but we're always ripping them up halfway through the tournament. I do look at that region as a possible region that we could see multiple upsets. I know we're hearing possibly Samford over Kansas, McNeese 12 over the 5 with Gonzaga, Purdue. We know that they've had their issues over the past few years. I don't expect them to lose in the first game. Who knows? Maybe Grambling can shake things up. Tennessee, what just happened? Do you agree with that? Do you think that we'll see some upsets coming out of the Midwest? And where are you at with Purdue right now?
I think at the end of the day, losing in the conference tournament sometimes can be a good thing for a team. I know it happened to Villanova the first year that they won the national title, where it's kind of just like a bit of like a reset. Virginia, the year that they won the national title, they didn't win the ACC tournament. So Purdue not winning the Big Ten tournament wasn't really like a red flag for me. I think sometimes it can be a bit of a reset because it's hard to win 6 games in a row in this tournament, let alone, going 9 in a row or whatever Purdue would have needed to win the Big Ten tournament. So sometimes I think that can be good just for like a bit of a reset and then get focused on the bigger picture, because Purdue could win the Big Ten tournament, the Big Ten regular season 10 years in a row. No one cares unless they do the damage in March. Tennessee, we were talking about the other day how they can be awesome when they're hitting shots, but when they're not hitting shots, we saw what they looked like against Mississippi State. So are they able to kind of flip the script? I don't think they'll shoot that bad again, but then you get potentially a Texas team there that Mark really likes, and I was starting to come around too until they blew that game in the Big 12 tournament to Kansas State. But talent-wise, it's another team, went to the Elite Eight last year, has a lot of guys returning. Creighton there too, potentially a nice little path opening for them. The game that really sticks out to me though for this one is that Gonzaga McNeese game. I was surprised to see Gonzaga all the way up at a 5. I remember we were on here like a month ago saying, are they even going to make the tournament? There they are as a 5 comfortably in. But Gonzaga McNeese State, I think that's going to be an awesome game round 1.
Well, I saw you shaking the head. Do you want me to take it, or do you want it, Mark? Because I think that's going to be one-sided and a complete blowout in Gonzaga's favor.
Oh, wow. So I love Gonzaga. The problem is I think McNeese State is by far the best 12, 13, 14, 15, or 16 seed. They've lost 1 game since Thanksgiving. I was ready to bet McNeese State against literally any 4 or 5 seed. Wisconsin, Kansas, St. Mary's, Alabama, Auburn, San Diego State. I would have bet McNeese State against any of them, or at least pick them in the bracket. Gonzaga is a scary, scary matchup, in my opinion. I really like the way they closed the year. I know they lost to St. Mary's to end the WCC conference tournament, but I think they've got an experienced guard there, Nemhard. They have EK, obviously. I think they have guys that have really developed throughout the year, and this Gonzaga team is not the Gonzaga team we were seeing play in the non-conference earlier in the year.
I think Gonzaga is the absolute worst matchup for McNeese.
Yeah,
because if there's one head coach out there who knows exactly what a mid-major can do and the threat it poses, it's Mark Few, because he was that guy for how many years, right? He was the mid-major, the gold standard for mid-major basketball. Nobody wanted to play Gonzaga. And now he's facing a 12 seed that everybody's going to be on in McNeese State. And you think that's going to go away? You think that experience isn't there? Oh, by the way, Gonzaga, I think, has probably played a top 10 level over the last 6 weeks and gotten back to the Gonzaga we like. And look, I'm not taking anything away from McNeese, but man, who would they played? They played VCU at the beginning of the season.
Dude, they knocked off Michigan at Michigan. Come on.
VCU was the only team ranked in the KenPom Top 100 that McNeese played all season long. They're out here playing like directional Louisiana every other week. Like the Southland Conference is traditionally, I know Stephen F. Austin.
No, they beat UAB by 21. UAB's in the tourney.
Yeah, but UAB's in the tourney by default at this point. Like they had to play Temple in the AAC final. They weren't a tournament team a week ago. It's hard for me to get juiced up about McNeese. Yes, it's a great story. Will Wade, Wade's not a great story. He's a crook, but they're all
offering money. Now we do it. Now it's like commonplace. What he was doing.
Right.
I think he was
crooks.
He was ahead of his time. That's what it was. Yeah.
If they were playing somebody else, I'd be like, okay, I'll buy into it. But man, it's very hard for me to buy into McNeese, and I could be completely wrong. You can save this clip I'll be wrong about 15 times of
Yeah,
things I say
well.
on this show, but I probably feel most confident in Gonzaga in hammering an opponent. I just don't feel like if McNeese got somebody else that was a little more vulnerable, like a Kansas, then I'd be really intrigued by them. Or maybe Wisconsin, like JMU does. But man, I think Gonzaga's going to roll them.
All right,
Thanks for
Mark
taking
Henry
away all
Jr.
my excitement, guys.
Yeah. Mark,
Sorry,
over to
B.
you with the Midwest. Since you're Mr. Big East with Marquette, are you matching him up with Creighton?
You know I am. I do think Creighton gets through this.
Wow.
Conference. Yeah. I've been kind of beating the drum for the top 3 of the Big East all year, saying I think they're 3 of the top 5 to 7 teams in the country, and I think it lined up really well for them. As you guys know, I'm low on Tennessee. Tennessee, who's 8-7 against quad 1 opponents. I think that's important to point out. Dalton connects. People love Dalton Connect. I bet on Mississippi State big time the other day, plus 10.5. Beef was tweeting me the Connect gifts to get me scared of Tennessee. Mississippi State came out and won by 21. And I think we've seen that in a lot of games that Tennessee's played against these good teams. They just haven't shown up. Like, that's a scary thing to me when we're talking about a 1 or a 2 seed. I think this Tennessee team is primed to get picked off. And I think Creighton sees a 7 seed in Texas. That puts them in the Elite 8. I've told you guys how I feel about Purdue. I love a potential Gonzaga-Creighton Elite 8 matchup. That's what I ended up with in my Elite 8. I could see
mid-majors, the OG mid-majors.
Exactly. An OG mid-major matchup.
I'm going to plant my flag in this right now. Sean, get the graphic up. We're going to cue this up for the video. I'll just, I'll cue you up here. Gonzaga plus 650 to win the Midwest is your best bet in any region. The Zags are playing phenomenal basketball. They play like a top 10 team. Mark Few has been there, done that, and the rest of the Midwest region is weak. Purdue, you got to beat a double-digit seed. You got to show me you can do that consistently before you even get into March. That painter's got red flags all over the place. Mark Few, I give him the advantage in that. Tennessee, I mean, how many times do we have to talk about Rick Barnes in March before it's, it's old? I mean, the sample size is there, and we just saw it last week against Mississippi State, plus the trend that no champions ever lost their first conference tournament game. This is the Gonzaga team that gets to the Final Four and potentially wins the national championship. I think this is the year that Gonzaga, after all of the years that we've sat here and said Gonzaga this, Gonzaga that, this is finally a Gonzaga team that has been counted out. They weren't in the tournament 8 weeks ago, and all of a sudden they've figured it out. They're a really good team in a region with a lot of question marks. Kansas might not make it out of the first round with Dickinson and McCullough. Even if they play, they're going to be banged up. I think Gonzaga to win the Midwest region at plus 650 is the best value you'll get in any of the 4 regions.
All right, I have a question though. If you're that confident in Gonzaga, why are they only a 6-point favorite over McNeese?
I don't make the odds.
Not legit.
I don't make the odds.
But the people
that's not my problem.
Usually more right than not.
If they're a 6-point favorite over McNeese, give me the sledgehammer. Like,
I think I have to go all in on McNeese. I think
you do.
adopt them as my team just out of spite.
Although their nickname is the Cowboys, though, so I wouldn't go
rough.
completely all in on that.
All right, Joe, and finally we'll just put a bow on the South here as far as with Gonzaga, Texas. Of course, we were talking a little bit about them earlier. Tennessee. There's a lot of big name teams. I guess the one question I would have is what is going on with Kansas? Because this was a team that
They're hurt.
Of course, you get Hunter Dickinson. Yeah, Dickinson
that's really all
is
it
incredible. So is everybody?
We didn't even mention Kansas. We just went through the entire thing,
right.
and we didn't even mention Kansas. That's insane.
Is anybody returning? Let's just start there then.
Yes, it sounds like Dickinson and McCullough are both going to be ready for the tournament, but I don't know. I need to be proven wrong with Kansas. I think, honestly, Samford is the team we're not talking about in terms of first-round upset. I mean, they have a big man in a Chor that can end up matching up with Dickinson. I watched them play, and look, they couldn't make their free throws and didn't hit the over in the SoCon final. I'm over that now. Maybe not. But they're a team that likes to push the pace, that like to press. They're going to put a team under pressure. And I think if we're talking about the 13 to 16 seeds that actually have a chance to pull off an upset, Samford's probably number 1 on that list because the list of 13 to 16 seeds is now incredibly diluted because you had all of these teams lose as number 1 seeds in their conference tournaments. So I think you're going to see a ton of blowouts featuring the top 4 seeds in the first round. You're going to see a lot of chalk, but then the one team that ends up being a little bit of a problem for somebody is Samford because of how they play at pace, their pressure. They're going to go in with no fear. And Kansas is vulnerable enough where I think that that's the upset you should be looking at in that region.
My take on the Samford-Kansas matchup, when you look at Kansas and the thing that has really plagued them and been their Achilles heel all year is the lack of depth. Now you're going to be playing a team that presses you for all 40 minutes. That could come up as a struggle. But also when you look at Samford, they're another team. Who have they beaten all year? I know it was the first game of the year, but they played Purdue and they lost by, I think, 45 points. I think it was 98-45. I remember watching that game on opening night. That's also, 3-4 months ago now. But at the same time, they didn't beat anyone this entire year. They lost to VCU by 10. And then just looking through their schedule, like Merrimack, they were going to maybe be a tournament team. Louisiana, Belmont, like they didn't beat a soul the entire season. So that's a little bit of a tricky one for me because you have the one side, they didn't beat anyone all year, but then Kansas, that's not what they want to do. Have to go deep into their bench, and they might have to do that playing a team that presses for 40 minutes.
I think it's a pretty simple kind of just fade on Kansas. I don't know what they're gonna even if Dickinson and McCullough are healthy. Like what happens if foul trouble? Their depth could go away instantly. I don't know if they have much. I think Samford, with the way they play, I could kind of move the goalposts on a bunch of these things, right? Because here I am saying McNeese ain't played nobody, Paul, but then I think Samford hasn't played anybody. But in terms of matchup and style of play, it could wreak havoc on Kansas.
7.5 point spread, Mark Henry Jr. 7.5 right now. Kansas favored. Anything on that one you want to add?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't lay the points with Kansas there, but I do think Kansas gets to the second round. I think Kansas gets past Samford. I think they win the game. I think the depth issues and the banged up things, I think that's going to start playing when you have a second game in 3 days. I think that's going to really factor in that second round game, whether that be Gonzaga or Joe Tanzi's hated McNeese Cowboys. I think it'll catch up to them in that second round. They won't get to the second weekend, but they will get by Samford.
Yeah, I was going to say that, Mark. I think the winner of that McNeese-Gonzaga game will go to the second weekend. So,
all right, we got 2 more regions we got to hit here. We're going to try and keep it under 60. Mark, I need you to sell me on the East region. I'll be up front when they unveiled it. I go, well, I don't know. There's nothing really that was moving me as far as matchups in that region, and I think it has a lot to do with my expectation for UConn. So with the East, what am I missing? What's moving you? What's moving the needle for you in the East region? Or is it lackluster like how I saw it? Just briefly, didn't really dive into it.
You got 3 of the teams that made the Final Four in the top half of the bracket of this one. So that's at least a fun one. You got UConn FAU. That's a team that's not going to be afraid. They went to the Final Four last year. I know that they haven't been exactly the most even team this year. They haven't been the most consistent. But, you got John L. Davis. You got Vladislav Golden. You got these guys who were there last year. You have Dusty May coaching. That's a tough matchup. I do think UConn gets by them, but that's a tough matchup right there. And then if they get by that, they go play San Diego State or Auburn. I have it as San Diego State getting by Auburn. And San Diego State, that's a rematch of the national championship last year. So I think that's a pretty fun potential right there. I'm pretty chalk in this one. I have UConn San Diego State in the Sweet 16, but I have Illinois Iowa State in the bottom half of that. And I have a 1-2 in the Elite Eight. So a little bit chalky, but I do have it as UConn Iowa State at the end. And I'd be lying if I said that there's a team in here that really puts the fear in me that UConn won't be in the Final Four. If you had to make me pick one that I think could give UConn problems, I guess it's just if Terrence Shannon scores 50, if Illinois gets into that Elite Eight and they could give them problems, but that defense has some problems. So yeah, I think UConn is the safest team to make the Final Four.
Beef, I want to come to you on this one next. One team that impressed me, and they have all season, and I don't think they're getting enough attention. I don't know where they match up. Iowa State. I know they're the 2 seed. What is your thoughts on Iowa State, the path that they have in front of them, how well that they played down the stretch, of course, winning their conference tournament, and where do you stand on the East as a whole?
Yeah, the Iowa State thing, I haven't been a believer in them all year, but I mean, after last night's beatdown of Houston. I feel like you got to buy into them a little bit. I thought in this one, the most surprising one for me was Auburn getting a 4. I thought they were underseeded. I thought they could have been like a 3. I'm really excited for that 7-10 matchup, Washington State and Drake. That's probably one of the first top 5 matchups of the first week for me, the first weekend. So I'm really looking forward to that game. The thing with UConn, though, I mean, I know everyone – I wouldn't be surprised if more than 75% of people pick them to go back and win it all. But teams have struggled coming off that national championship to even make it to the second weekend. Just off the top of my head, I know Kansas last year, they lost to Arkansas in the second game, and then Baylor lost to North Carolina. So the last 2 champions haven't even made it to the second weekend in the next year. And then as we know with UConn, the last team to go back-to-back national titles was Florida back in 06-07. So a lot of history is saying don't believe maybe in UConn long-term, maybe take another angle. But this UConn team is also pretty special. And what Hurley's kind of built there, I said it the other day during the St. John's game, the past 2 years of this UConn basketball team have the ability to have that avalanche effect on a team like no other. Like their ability to just open games up and make it from a 5-point game to a 15-point game in a blink of an eye is pretty insane.
Joe, the East to you, sir.
I will drink the Kool-Aid on Illinois.
Ooh.
I'm going to do it. They're plus 700.
Why not?
Like they have the longest odds of the top 4 seeds to reach the Final Four. And when I look at this bracket, now look, there are some teams that I've really fallen in love with. Washington State being one of them as the 7th seed. But I got trust issues with them. I don't know if just getting to that point is their accomplishment. It's been a while since they've been in the NCAA tournament, and you're going up against an experienced Drake team with Tucker DeVries, one of the best mid-major players out there. And, oh, by the way, that game's a pick'em, or Drake is a 1-point favorite last time I looked. Tells you all you need to know about how those 2 teams match up. I think it's going to be a very tough game for them. I'm not buying anything into the Iowa State win over Houston, because the way I look at that championship game is Houston was banged up. I don't think Jamal Shed really played a ton of minutes in the second half. Houston kind of packed it in once they realized they weren't going to win. It was pretty much a home game for Iowa State and Kansas City. And if you go too deep into conference tournament results, it usually ends up biting you. Now, that being said, Iowa State's still a very good team. But can they score 75, 80 points against Illinois if Illinois dictates the pace in that potential, what would that be, a Sweet 16 game? I don't know if they can do that. And that's what kind of it puts a little bit of concern into Iowa State. Now, that being said, Mark's been right about Illinois. They can't defend. But if I'm going to take an explosive point guard in Terrence Shannon who could potentially score 30, 40 points, I'll take that over Iowa State. I think that's where I lie. And then I see the number plus 700 and I'm like, it looks good. Because what happens if UConn loses? Who's that team? Is it the FAU San Diego State? I think we might be sleeping on Auburn just a little bit. They are the 4 seed, but they also have a pretty bad record against the top teams in the SEC. So I feel like the bottom half, if UConn loses, is where your region champion is coming from. And BYU's been too inconsistent. They'll probably beat Duquesne because it's the first year in the tournament for Duquesne. But still, I know what you're doing because BYU's been up and down. But I think Illinois, in terms of what they can match in terms of scoring with UConn, that could be fun. I'm willing to take that risk. I'll take them at plus 700 to take the East.
All right. Put a bow on the East. Mark Henry Jr., anything you want to bring up from Joe there?
Yeah, real quick, just on Iowa State, because I've kind of been the high when me, Beef, and Joe have been talking college basketball on the streams this year. I've kind of been the highest on Iowa State, I think. I've kind of been riding them for a while. I actually saw them in person way back in like early January when I was down in Texas and saw them play Texas. And this thing I've noticed about Iowa State in a lot of games this year, they have this knack for staying up like 5 to 10 points on a team all game, kind of controlling the entire tempo of the game. And then once that team makes that run to bring it within a possession to tie the game, Iowa State's, they have 3 really good guards. One of those guards is able to just go get a bucket and stop the bleeding. Like, it just feels like every time I've watched so many Iowa State games that kind of follow the same script. They control the game. The other team makes a run near the end of the second half. Then Iowa State comes in and controls it, wins by 6 to 10 points. Like, feels like clockwork.
All right. Well, it should be a good one. And again, the path is there for them to make it a little bit of a run here, and that's a really good squad. So why not UConn? Of course, I just don't know who the hell is going to beat them. I just don't know who's going to make them lose. But this is the madness. We'll see how it plays out. All right, final one.
Iowa State can drag them into a rock fight, and Illinois can score with them. Those are the only two teams I see beating them.
I agree with both. On that. Absolutely. Auburn, some are saying that they're not getting the seed one was disrespectful. Joe,
Auburn's fraudulent.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think that anybody would be raising too much of a stink about that. All right, Joe, let's stay with you, though, and let's get on down to the West. The man nailed it. A few weeks ago, he said on my show, on the Daily Ticket and on the Sicko stream, where you guys were talking all things college hoops a couple weeks ago, that as far as the fourth and final number one seed, UNC at plus 750. Plus 750 on DraftKings Sportsbook was needed to be a play in your portfolio. You nailed it. It played out exactly how you thought it would. And they didn't even win their conference tournament, which is crazy. For the Wolfpack actually beat them. First time that they were able to win the ACC tournament since 1987. Just an incredible game. Beef and I were texting last night. Really impressive stuff there from the Wolfpack. But that is no more. We're focusing on the bracket here in the West. North Carolina, the overall number one seed. Nice work there. Joe, your big takeaway from this region is what?
Just out of principle, and because I know we're going to talk about it, I'm just going to take Michigan State to the Sweet 16, put $5 on it, and just because it's Tom Izzo in March, I've no reason to believe Michigan State is going to absolutely do anything in this tournament. But when I look at that bracket and I see Izzo as a lower seed, that's the key point here. As a lower seed, something weird always happens with them. I wouldn't suggest taking them in your bracket. I think Carolina is better. I think Mississippi State's probably even better than them. But man, he always finds a way. And since Syracuse isn't in the bracket this year, Michigan State's going to have to be that team of why the hell did they make this run to the second weekend? Just out of principle, I'm going to take them to the Sweet 16 as like a sprinkle. Again, I don't know. I don't have any conviction behind it, but it's Izzo in March. That being said, I think UNC should probably get into the second weekend. They're very deep. They've got a ton of experience. And if you look at the bracket as a whole, I mean, Alabama's given you about 50,000 reasons to be concerned about them down the stretch. Charleston's a potentially sneaky 13 seed. Clemson, I don't buy into. Baylor, I've kind of gone a little bit off on them. And then Arizona, when they're at their best, absolutely. But they've also lost twice in the last, 8 days to USC and to Colorado and shown some flaws there. So I think it's Carolina's bracket to lose. But I look at that bottom half and see if I can kind of manipulate any way to – and I think this is going to end up being when props come out for Sweet 16, for Elite 8, for second weekend, stuff like that. Baylor looks intriguing just because they've been there, done that before. And Arizona, look, we talk so much about Purdue and Tennessee. Arizona, now, albeit under Sean Miller, but they don't have the best track record either. I mean, they lost to Princeton last year. There's a team that's very vulnerable as well, and we've seen it. The potential flaws creep in over the last few weeks. To me, it's a very just like unexciting bracket. I'll be honest with you. Like St. Mary's Grand Canyon doesn't do anything for me. I think St. Mary's wins that game, but St. Mary's games are usually in the 60s and very kind of just like, oh, well, they got the job done. I think that game is probably destined for 10:25 on Thursday or Friday night on True TV. Baylor is what Baylor is. Dayton, I've kind of cool on them. Nevada and New Mexico, like, is the Mountain West really that bad? Like that's we have to find out here, right? And we really don't know. Clemson, maybe they win a game. Not really a huge fan of them. Got some decent players. So yeah, it feels like if chalk were to hold, North Carolina Arizona is the best game in this bracket. I don't know. There's nothing really that excites me here. I guess I'm going to take Carolina plus 235 because they're behind Arizona on the odds to win the region, but I don't have any like really big takes on that other than I'm I'm going to take a flyer on Michigan State Sweet 16 because it's Izzo.
Izzo equals March. Beef, your take on the West?
Well, for the initial bracket show when it was Davis, Kellogg, and Jay Wright, I was kind of surprised of the lack of like respect for North Carolina. I'm pretty sure no one had North Carolina out of that bunch going to the Final Four. They've been a pretty dominant team. I know last night slipped up to a really hot NC State team, but I think they're getting a little bit disrespected there as a 1 seed. I kind of like their path here to the Final Four. I just can't get my head wrapped around Michigan State. Sometimes they look like the dominant team that we expected them to be, and then other times they just fall apart. Like they haven't been a consistent bunch all year. That being said, all they need to do is win 2 games to get to that Sweet 16.
I'm not basing any of this off of their play. I'm basing it solely on Tom Izzo and March. This is just they're not a good team.
Yeah. I agree. I'm not a believer in them either. But 2 matchups I'm keeping my eye out for in this first round. Alabama-Charleston. If you like points, if you like threes, that's a fun one. I think over-under, that one's 170. And they said on the broadcast, Charleston 20-0 this year when they score 80 or more. You're going to have to score more than 80 points probably to beat Alabama. And Alabama probably is going to give you 80 points. So that's something to look for there. I thought Alabama getting a 4 was pretty insane. They don't really have much respect in my eyes. And then the other matchup, I really like Mark Henry's Baylor Bears -13 against Colgate. I just think athletically Colgate will not be able to keep up with them. We've seen Colgate the past couple of years. It was Arkansas the 1 year, Texas last year. They can hang tough at the beginning a little bit, but the speed, the athleticism, it wears them down. And that's where in the second half, especially, these teams separate. So I think Baylor over Colgate could be one of the bigger blowouts in the first round this weekend.
I think that's a really important point you make with athleticism, all the above against these double-digit 14, 15, 16 seeds. Like, it's going to take a perfect game like St. Peter's or FDU to really do this. And the fact that these teams have gotten weaker or are weaker because they are, 3, 4, 5 seeds from their conference tournaments. Colgate isn't, but there are teams out there that you shouldn't even touch from an upset perspective because of just how poorly they played, and a 1 week sample size of being good. It just isn't enough to convince me that they'll upset anybody.
Do you guys want the fake upset of the year? I have the fake upset of the year for you.
Fake upset of the year. Let's go.
I'll take 11 seed New Mexico -2.5 against Clemson. They are a 2.5 point favorite.
That's a fair line.
Clemson. And I think New Mexico gets by Clemson. And not only do I think New Mexico gets by Clemson, you got to pick a double-digit seed to get to the Sweet 16. Mm-hmm. And I think New Mexico gets by Baylor. And New Mexico's got a great offense. They've got the 23rd ranked defense as well. They're the 21st. Yeah, no, I'm wrong. Sorry. 23rd ranked defense. They're 23rd in Ken Palm. They're better than Clemson here. They're only, 9 spots behind Baylor. I think New Mexico has 3 guards. You've got Mashburn. You've got I'm missing the name here. House. I always get Leday from San Diego State and House from New Mexico confused. It's a Mountain West. It's always late when I'm watching the Mountain West basketball. But they got a lot of guard play. They take care of the ball. They don't turn the ball over, and they turn you over. So I just think New Mexico's got the perfect recipe. Richard Pitino, Rick got left out in the cold. He's not going to the NIT, but his son is in the tournament at New Mexico.
By the way, everything you just said about New Mexico, we've said about Baylor for like 5 years. So it's like the perfect like counterbalance to what Baylor's built their program on.
Yeah, the Baylor
tip times dropped as well.
Oh, they did.
Yeah. Times dropped.
Yep, we got Michigan State, Mississippi State for the first game on Thursday.
That is the least surprising thing ever. They're putting Izzo front and center.
The first game Friday, Northwestern.
Early bird special.
Yep, they're getting the Izzo upset out of the way right away.
What time do they normally play the good games at? Is that like a 6 o'clock window?
It all depends.
Yeah.
It really depends on market and all that stuff. Like Duke, the running joke was Duke used to be the 7 o'clock game, so Jim Nantz could call those games.
They are 7:10.
By the way, yep, I called it. By the way, Grand Canyon St. Mary's is the last tip-off time scheduled on Friday.
How about that? Wow, nice call by you on that one. All right, let's wrap it up with a little rapid fire. What do you say, boys? We kept it underneath an hour here. We got 2 full days of breaking this down. Definitely going to be doing it all day on Monday, of course, Tuesday with the first 4. Looking forward to all of this week. But let's go ahead and get right into some rapid fire questions. Joe, I'll start with you. The first number 1 seed to fall.
Purdue.
Mark Henry Jr. agrees. Beef.
Yep. I'm going to go off the wall here. I'm going to go UConn. I'm going to say
That's
UConn
fair.
does not make it to the second weekend. I just looked it up. Since 2016 was the last time the reigning national champion made it to the second weekend when Duke did it.
It's tough.
That's shocking.
Let's take a wild card. And if they match up with Florida Atlantic's not going to be scared.
They very much are not.
The number 2 rapid fire question, Mark Henry Jr., start with you. How many 12s over the 5s? How many 12 seeds advance over the 5s?
I've only got one. I've only got 112, and it's JMU. I've got JMU over Wisconsin. San Diego State, I feel really good about against UAB. St. Mary's, I feel really good about against Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon, a little bit of a home court merchant, in my opinion. Undefeated at home, not quite as good on the road. I don't think that'll travel quite as well, even though they are out west. I like St. Mary's to take care of that. And then Gonzaga over McNeese, even though I want to give McNeese the credit, but only 112.
Tansy, how many 12s over 5s?
JMU over Wisconsin. That's it.
That's it. Beef.
I think I'm going to go with I think I'm just going to go with 1. I think I'm going to go with my Cowboys to take down Gonzaga. I think San Diego State blows out UAB. That's the 5 over 12 I feel the best about.
All right. Final rapid fire question. This kind of goes into what we tiptoed a little earlier, Mark Henry Jr. We understand what an upset is when with odds and all that, of course, money. But let's just go off of the seeding here at this point in time. So your favorite upset as far as seeding is concerned, you're not going to top New Mexico over Clemson, right? 11 over to 6.
Yeah, I've got JMU too, but yeah, I will say one just to throw out one we haven't talked about at all. A team I don't buy at all. I think they've overperformed all year is South Carolina. So give me the 11 seed in Oregon, who's been up and down, but they have the talent and they have the coach.
All right, Joe Tansy.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with Mark. I think Oregon over South Carolina. I think Samford over Kansas is real as well. I've been the biggest fan of South Carolina for quite some time, but we have the coaching matchup favors Oregon with Dana Altman against Lamont Paris, and Fale Dante has been playing some fantastic ball down low against Oregon for Oregon, and I think that's the one matchup that the Ducks could exploit. I think they're one of the few conference tournament team winners that could actually make noise in the tournament because of what they have on their roster.
Beef, give us an upset.
I think I'm going to go with Drake over Washington State. I picked Drake to win the MVC. Washington State, I think down the stretch, they fizzled out a little bit, and Drake's going to have the best player in that game in Tucker DeVries. So give me Drake over Washington State in the 10th.
That's a great guard matchup, by the way, with DeVries and Miles Rice. Two guards that if you don't know them now because they're going to take over that game. It's going to be a fantastic showcase.
Drake's
a rapid
1.5
fire
point dog
question
there,
as
by the
well.
way.
What's up?
I have a rapid fire question if I could throw one out as well.
Bring it.
I mean, the past few, or last year at least, we saw a 16 and we saw a 15. I know this is a crapshoot kind of pick, but looking at the 15s and 16s, do you see anyone or who would you pick as your upset? There's one that I'm looking at. And
Peacock Nation, stand up.
That's the one that stuck out to me. I'm going to pick Tennessee because I have the future on them, but the way that they play with the pace, St. Peter's, they can make that game really ugly. And if Tennessee's not making shots, we'll see. But that's the one that stuck out to me.
What was his name? Was it Dougie Buckets?
Dougie Buckets, Doug Etter, yeah.
Eater?
He's no longer there, right?
He's at Bryant.
Oh, yeah. Anybody else want to take up on that rapid fire?
Yeah,
I won't. Okay.
South Dakota State.
The Otzelberger Bowl.
Yes, it is the Otzelberger Bowl. Nation's fifth longest win streak at 8 for South Dakota State. This is a team that can score. If they can find a way to break Iowa State's defense, which is very good. But I think if you're going to give me a 15 over a 2 or a 16 over a 1, South Dakota State is that team.
I hate to bring up Arizona because I picked them to win the title last year and they lost to a 15 seed. I will say I don't think they're going to lose. They're like a 20.5 point favorite. If anything, I actually think bet Arizona minus 20.5 because they'll come out prepared after losing to a 15. But Long Beach State fired their coach on Sunday, and he went on to win the conference tournament. If any, that does feel like a bit of a March storyline. They go on and win the first round, and this guy was fired. Now he's up for jobs. It does feel like something.
Yeah, that's the emotional one, but I don't think Arizona does it twice.
Yeah.
If Arizona didn't lose to Princeton though,
pray for Tommy Lloyd.
Yeah, what's that guy's name? It's Dan
Monson.
Yeah, he goes, I'm the luckiest guy, not Jim Harbaugh. It's pretty good. So, hey, this is the time for crazy, right? This is when the madness is here. Not going to ask for any championship winners, not going to ask any Final Four because we got Monday and Tuesday to get after it. And, of course, we're going to be filling out the brackets and a lot more information will be coming in. Looking forward to all of that, breaking it down all week on The Gambler. We're going to have live shows during the games or during previews for the days of the games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll be checking in live. You're going to be hearing these guys featured on the Daily Ticket and on the station as well throughout the course of the tournament. Once again, all coverage being brought to you by AAA. Be ready, get AAA. I'll tell you straight up, my wife has it. We've used it twice in the last 3 years, and it's exactly one of those things where it's like when something happens, you're grateful because you have AAA. When you don't have AAA, it's always going to be a headache. So be ready, get AAA. For Joe Tanzi, Ryan Beef Coyle, Mark Henry Jr., I'm Sean Brace. The madness is here. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Brand new Daily Ticket on Monday.